could this thing last but the age of miracles hadn't passed, for suddenly I saw you there, and through foggy London town the sun was shining everywhere.
There is a certain romantic element to it. Walking down to the embankment from St Bartholomew's, for instance, with gas lamps and a swirl of fog, listen to Vaughan Williams' London Symphony. The slow movement captures it completely.
We grew up with fogs. We used to go down to Portobello Road and nick the fruit and nick anything that we can get hold of, but nobody would chase us because of the fog. They wouldn't run after us.
I can remember fogs being every winter, but they don't sort of actually strike a note with me. But because my dad died that weekend, I can remember the weekend very clearly.
Any fog would cause an increase in deaths, but this was sudden. You see, in most cases, those people would have been taken into hospital. But this came like a killer in the night, literally.
In December 1952, the world's romance with London's fog ended in a disaster, the true extent of which has never been acknowledged. Now, hidden documents reveal how one of the world's worst peacetime catastrophes claimed as many as 12,000 lives in the centre of London. The Christmas shopping season had just begun when the fog descended on the city.
I don't think the bleating devil himself could have driven it away. It was that thick. On that night, it was vicious.
It was a warm fog. It was wrapped around you. It was all-possessing.
It was smelly, it was dirty, it was black.
It had an acrid, acidy feel about it.
It seeped into the houses, and indoors everywhere was covered with a sort of grey film. It's quite uncanny.
Round about 3 o'clock, it started getting more dense. And towards the 4 o'clock period, our crane driver said that he couldn't see. His visibility was down to nil. And we couldn't see him, but he said he could see the clouds. He could see above him, but he couldn't see through. So there was a mantle of thick fog between the ground, and he was somewhat 50 foot above us. And in consequence, we stopped work.
The Great Fog not only did its best to keep shipping tied up, it made things very unpleasant for everybody.
At Sadler's Wells, a performance of La Traviata was stopped when the audience could no longer see the stage.
The fog had came down while we were in the cinema, and you couldn't see the screen. It was, I mean, you could see that it was light, but you couldn't make out the details on the screen, so you simply went home. And you were talking about here an enclosed building, but that's what it would do. It would come into, God only knows how it did, but it did. It came in.
At the Smithfield Livestock Show, stockmen tried using whiskey-soaked Hessian masks to protect the cattle from the fog.
Well, it was a green colour, and it hung around in these caves down below. It never got clear. There was no way it could get clear. Every beast has to lie down just as you and I do, and they just never got up.
traffic in London was completely at a standstill on many occasions. In fact, the fog was the worst on record for many a year.
The street lights you couldn't see, and it was really blacker than any blackout we had during the war, because there was bugger all you could see.
It was one of the first times, I think, when I realised that although I was partially sighted, my other senses were far more acute than anybody else's. My mother always came to meet me from school. She was talking to me, trying to make it seem as natural as possible so that I wouldn't get worried and afraid. And I suddenly told her to stop, and if I hadn't done, she'd have hit her nose on the wall, because she just hadn't realised the wall was so close. She was inches from it. But I'd heard her voice change, with the sound echoing back from the wall, which was obviously even thicker than the smog.
My younger brother was on a funeral which started out at West Hendon, and by coincidence there was another funeral in the same road that same afternoon, and in the smog the two funerals got completely mixed up, and there was just a convoy with two lots of funeral vehicles, a milk float, a dust cart, and that wasn't very popular.
Fog, the longest and thickest on record, brings Britain its darkest days since the blackout. It gives transport services an even bigger headache than bank holiday.
I was walking in front of a vehicle going into Easttown Memorial Hospital, and got in there, pulled round to the casualty and walked round the back of the ambulance, and behind me was a baker's van. And he put his head out the window and said, "Well, where are we, mate?" You know, I said, "We're at Easttown Memorial." He said, "Oh, I thought you knew where you was going." So I said, "Well, I do, but you're the one that's lost."
Once here, the fog comes to stay.
Slowing down traffic of all kinds, cutting down visibility to a dangerous degree, putting a premium on how to get to work, and more important still, some may think, on how to get home.